May I have your attention, please? On behalf of the Council of Administrators and Supervisors, I welcome you this afternoon. My name is Tony Lorino. I'm the President of the Council of Administrators and Supervisors. Last October, we had a similar conference, and at that time, Part 154 was really very, very new to us, having come out in April and then in full force in June. We were all questioning what to do. How should we do it? Well, we had our first conference, and we had a panel consisting of Roger Tillis, the New York State Education Department Regent for Long Island, Senator John Flanagan, the Chairman of the Senate Education Committee, Dr. James Grassani, Superintendent of the Smithtown School District, and Stephanie McIntosh, Administrator for Federal Funds, Research and Development, and Supervisor of ESL in Sachem School District. At the end of that conference, many of our members expressed an interest in having another one toward the middle or the three-quarter part of the year, since there were so many questions that were still coming out, and they wanted to make sure that they were ready for the September when this starts. Well, we are very, very fortunate indeed today to have as our guest speaker Angelica Infante, who is the New York State Associate Commissioner for Bilingual Education and World Language. And Angelica, thank you very much for giving your time to be here today. The Council of Administrators and Supervisors had 1,400 members, 75 units in Nassau and Suffolk County. Now I'd like to introduce to you the people who are on the executive board of the council. We have Skip Vornfeld, our Executive Vice President, Terry McGrelly, Vice President, Vinnie Vizzo, Vice President, John Nassaro, Treasurer, Janet Weissel, Secretary, Frank Nacarado, Suffolk Director, Jim Casabom, Nassau Director, Frank Creda, Christine DiPaolo, and Dennis O'Hara, our committee chairs. Our two attorneys are not here this evening. They are about their business. They are in school districts this afternoon, and we wish them well. That's Brad Stula and Mike Starvacci. And of course, we have our office manager, Demetria Marino. I would like to ask John Nassaro to moderate this meeting. John, please.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Tony, and again, welcome everyone. It was nice speaking with many of you before the program began and gaining some insight of the concerns that you have regarding Part 154. As Tony said, our fall program that we held answered a lot of questions. It also left us with many questions and a lot of information that those of you in the room still needed to know. Since that time 5 months ago, your school districts and you have been planning for the implementation of Part 154. This is impacting budgets, staffing, curriculum, and the list goes on. So today, we're hoping to shed further light into what these new regulations are going to mean. As Tony had said, we're very fortunate to have Ms. Infante with us today. She has brought a presentation with her that I think would make sense to open with. Many of you did submit questions. We did try to categorize those questions, and we're going to try to get to those at the end of the presentation. But first, I'd like to introduce Ms. Infante, thank her for coming, and she's going to go through the latest regulations, the latest form of that for us this afternoon. So Ms. Infante, thank you once again. Turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to walk around a little because it helps to kind of keep you awake, even though I know this is an exciting topic, and I'm glad to hear that L's are on the agenda a lot. Hopefully we'll be on there again, and we'll be talking about all the great things that you're doing, not so much concerns and questions. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the regulation. I don't know how familiar you are. I know that Terry's been doing wonderful work here, and how many of you know Terry? So you probably have seen the presentation that I have. How many of you have seen Terry's presentation? A couple of you, okay. So I'm gonna go through it very, very, very quickly, and what I'm gonna do is give you, if you need me to stop in any particular place, I'm fine with that. I want you to leave here with as many questions answered as possible. There's some that you are not gonna be able to answer, like, I'm not even gonna pose them, right? Especially since I don't have an answer for you, okay? So, we're going to talk a little bit about, so who knows when was the last time Part 154 was updated? And major updates, when was the last time that we've done anything? 30 years, right? So what has happened in 30 years? Let's see, nothing? We're still doing the same thing we were doing 30 years ago? Your numbers have grown, right? Instructionally, what you're doing is change. I hope we're not doing the same thing we were doing 30 years ago, right? We're not doing that. I don't want to talk about Common Core. I don't want to talk about any of that, especially since you have a lot of press going on. However, things have changed, but they have not changed for English language learners. So this is what the regulation change is all about. And we're going to talk about them and see where they make sense, where you have questions. I think they all make sense. But where you have questions, where you are thinking about where you may need to shift. And also, we created a chart. It will be released on Monday. I can't give it to you officially because our lawyers have to look at it. There's a lot of bureaucracy around this. But the chart will help you think about how you're scheduling, what teachers should be working with the kids, as well as what does it look like, and is there any flexibility? For some reason, some of the questions that I get, people seem to think that there is no flexibility. But we're going to show you where there is and what kind of things you can do. Because when I had a recent conversation with a district that said, I need 6 extra teachers. After we talked it through, they needed 0.5. Okay? Because part of it is that you're going to have to schedule differently. You're going to have to plan differently. It's going to change. But it doesn't mean that the solution is to get 5 extra teachers. You may need 2. But I think that once you see the way that we've broken it down, and you tell us if it's helpful, it's coming out Monday. If you don't feel it's helpful, we won't release it on Monday. I'm not going to go through all of them. How many of you have seen the blueprint for L success? Some of you, okay. So that is the framework for all of this. So one of the most important things that we have is our first bullet. All teachers are teachers of English language learners and must plan accordingly. What does that mean? So as you start thinking about how you're scheduling, we will talk about minutes later because I know that's what the conversation is about, right? A lot of people are interested in that. How are you talking, what are some of the things, if you're looking at this first principle, that you need to be doing as you're thinking about your scheduling? Silence? No, come on. Yes.
That some of the students will have to be, all ESL students will have to be serviced in an integrated model in addition to, or instead of the standalone.
Okay, sort of. So her response was that all students will have to be served in an integrated model as well as standalone. So we're gonna look at that. Some of that, there's some truth to that, not completely, but even before we get there, what does this say to you? Yes?
That even if the student is not with an ESL teacher, the teacher they are with is still responsible for.
Thank you. That is exactly correct. So even if they're not sitting with an ESOL teacher, that teacher is responsible for those kids as well, right? So what does that mean? Is there planning time with the ESOL teacher? Is there conversations? Do they know their levels of the students? So even before we get to the minutes, what are some of the shifts that you need to make within your district to ensure success academically for these kids, right? So this is kind of the umbrella. We haven't even gotten to the minutes, but is that happening in your district? Do the teachers know the scores? Are they working with the ESOL teachers? Does that happen? Okay, it's just a question. Number 2, all school boards and district school leaders are responsible for ensuring the academic, linguistic, social, and emotional needs of ELs are addressed. Okay, so why is that important? Come on, I know it's warm outside and we're excited, but why is that important? It's important for all kids, right? It's important for all kids. However, for this population, more so. Take a stab. How many of you have received a large influx of English language learners this year? Okay. How many of you think that some of them are some of the unaccompanied minors? Okay. We don't know for sure unless they bring in the paperwork. We can't make assumptions, right? And we shouldn't be asking for it. If you saw the admissions regulation, right? We shouldn't be asking for those type of paperwork. So what happens with some English language learners? So you have this population that comes into your school. You're looking at them academically. In order for students to succeed academically, social emotionally has to be met, their needs. So what do we know about this population in particular? That we're just talking about, the unaccompanied minors.
They're suffering.
They're suffering, some of them, yeah.
They're fleeing very complicated and difficult situations.
They're fleeing very complicated and difficult situations in their home country, right? Absolutely. So you're coming to school, may or may not have family here, are fleeing a situation. For most of these kids, it's life or death, right? As a parent, if you're a parent, you would not send your child across a border unless you thought that their life was in danger. A couple of things you should know about this population too. Many of the children that cross this border were taken advantage of by the coyotes, the people that brought them over. And we're talking about physically taking advantage of them, right? So now you have children that are already leaving a very difficult situation, encounter that, and then come here to a place that may or may not want them. So you have all these things that are happening and are coming to live with maybe extended family members, maybe with other people. So how do you work under that pressure? Added pressure. Costs about $10,000 to go into this country, right? Most of these kids come from very poor families. So the expectation is that they come here and they have to work and pay these coyotes, because if not, they will kill their families in their home country. So that's just an example, right? This is an example. So how do you go to school, succeed with all that happening if we're not addressing everything that the child brings to the table? For all children, and I gave that as an example, because there are kids that don't come under those circumstances, but also have social emotional needs. And we'll talk a little bit about those kids. How many of you have SIFE students that may not be unaccompanied minors? For those of you that don't know, SIFE students are student with interrupted formal education, and now we added actually inconsistent to the definition, right? Because we had kids that, for example, went to a one-room schoolhouse. It's not that they didn't have an education, but it's not what we would consider an education.